am Orlando Jones, and I just want you to know that the Moana Nui Podcast will be starting soon. Stay tuned, yo.
I'm Veronica Taylor, and from myself and Ash Ketchum, I just want to say, Moana Nui, I choose you!
Everybody, I am Mike Watson, and I'm back. Hey, everyone, I got to sing and host the Moana Nui Podcast show. It's makes me feel good that I get to come in and pitch it. That's what it's like. I'm like a relief pitcher, and I get to come up and step up. But in case you don't know me, I've been on here a few times. I am the publisher of Freestyle Comics, lead artist on there, and things like that. And I do a podcast show myself called Chat and Draw. And right now, I currently have a Kickstarter going at fskgo.com. We're actually done with this Kickstarter tomorrow night at 9 p.m. So come hang out with me tomorrow. I'll be doing a stream to close us out. But if you have not backed it and you want to, and you like cool superhero comics about a young guy trying to prove to his ex-girlfriend he never cheated on her without revealing he's a superhero, I got the book for you. As a matter of fact, I have 12 issues of it that you can go check out at fskgo.com. And if you don't have any money to back it, that's fine. You can give us a share if you have the time. Shares are just as important as the money. Thanks. All right. That's all. I might promo it again, but I don't want to disrespect the podcast. You're going to let me come out here and run the deck and stuff. So I'm not going to play around. But we have an amazing show for you tonight. I'm super excited about this one. Look, I don't get nervous a whole lot, but every once in a while I'll get these little jitters of excitement when when these type of guests come aboard. And we're going to be bringing up, Moana is going to be coming. We're going to be talking to her because she's involved in this awesome project that we're going to be asking all types of questions about. But we got Greg Pop on here as well, and he is a Korean American filmmaker and comic book writer, best known for his award-winning feature film, Robot Stories, his blockbuster comics, Planet Hulk, and World War Hulk, one of my favorites. His original comics, Mech, Cadet, and Ronin Island, and his current work on comics like Darth Vader, which has been amazing, Duo, and Stranger Things. Pac rhymes with rock, as he would say, has written almost 600 individual comic books. His work includes Ronin Island and Mecha.U, create our own series from Boom Studios, Action Comics, and Batman and Superman for DC, Battlestar Galactica, John Wick, James Bond. The list just goes on. He's done so much work, and he is just leaving it all on the table here. Let's go ahead and bring him on out. Greg, everybody.
Hey, y'all. Thanks so much for having me.
Hey, Greg, this is an honor to meet you and be able to do this cast with you today. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Pleasure to be here. How about yourself?
I'm very excited to be here. So I guess Moana's going to pop in as soon as she gets somewhere quiet. Oh, wait, there she is.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, Moana.
Aloha. How are you guys doing?
Doing well.
Hopefully you can hear me okay. I'm at a Starbucks,
I see the green awning.
Yes, borrowing their Wi-Fi. So here we are in Hawaii.
Well done. That's cool.
Well, everyone knows you here, Moana. This is your podcast with Dana. So she's awesome. If you did not know, if you're just learning this is my sis. I love her to death and so much respect to her. She's out here doing incredible things in fashion, children's book, literature, comic books, you name it, she does it and killing it everywhere. So let's get into this. I've got a set of questions and we're going to be talking about a bunch of stuff tonight. But what I'm so excited about is the project that y'all are working on. Number one, I just told Moana the other day, this was the right project for you. Like, this is where you needed to be at. But then to be collaboration with Greg here. All right, who wants to go first? How excited were you for this project? And let's let everybody know what it is.
Well, we're doing a Lilo and Stitch comic book. It is published by Dynamite Comics. Editor is Nate Cosby. I'm writing it. The artist is Giuliana Giacomino. The letterer is Jeff Ecclesbury and Moana is our big amazing cultural consultant, and also you also have a title of development producer, right? Is that, or development editor, right? Yeah, and so it takes place right after the first movie, and I'm just ridiculously excited about it. I mean, back in the day, Lilo and Stitch was, to this day, is probably my favorite of sort of the new Disney movies. I remember I loved it when it came out. I loved the look and feel of the movie, that sort of gorgeous 2D animation and just the organic feel, the almost like watercolor kind of backgrounds. I love the fact that it had, Asian Pacific Islanders in it. We got, we had folks like, I'm Asian American, but I'm not Native Hawaiian, but I still was like, oh, this is a big animated movie with people who kind of look like me, right? You know what I mean? And it was a big deal. It was a big deal. And it had just this amazing kind of feeling of of course, family is the big theme, Ohana, but it was this combination of goofy sci-fi stuff, big fun sci-fi stuff, and really heartfelt family stuff that was actually really specific too, with a really specific family going through very specific struggles and sort of and also main characters who were just kind of messed up, who misbehaved a lot in like really understandable and relatable ways, and so I've been thrilled to work on it, even more thrilled to have Moana on board, who is just helping us make it really, really sing, really feel real.
So Moana, the same question, but I think I want to put this from a perspective, you and I being close in age. How big is this for you, us being fans of Lilo and Stitch and watching it when it first came out, and like, who would know that years later you would be a key factor to working on this? Speak to that, please.
Yeah, so I'm super excited too. I am still a huge fan of the Lilo and Stitch franchise, obviously because it takes place on my island too. So if you guys didn't know, Kauai is where the story takes place. That's where I'm from. And so to be working on it, like, if you're in my inner circle, I have like my message thing. I'm like, somebody please pinch me right now. Like, is this real? Do I really get to do this? And then like there's the Lilo and Stitch aspect, and then there's the Greg aspect. I'm like, do you understand like what Greg has worked on? Like Planet Hulk, stop it right now. Like I can't. And then, he's working on Vader, which I'm also really enjoying because he's building out the handmaidens who are the bodyguards to Padme, giving that females love and building out those characters. And so when Greg and I first met, we had an initial conversation, and just like the questions and the way he approached me in talking about it, I could tell that he is the right writer for this project, who will he's really taking the cultural aspects, the minute details, like really into consideration. And I appreciate that because he caught some things that I didn't even catch. Like, you're right, that would be wrong, and we should probably fix that if we can. So yeah, I'm really excited. It's nice to see the community around me also getting excited. Like, Moana, are you really working on Lilo and Stitch? So I'm grateful for the opportunity and really looking forward to where Greg is going to take this story. And I would also I would be curious, Greg, like how did you figure out where you were going to take Lilo and Stitch next? Because with Stitch, we can land anywhere. The guy is a Tasmanian devil is what I say. But yeah, I would love to hear like your inspiration for like how that came out about for you, and then how did you decide where you were going to take it next?
Well, it's kind of funny because when we first started working on the book, we were kind of like at first it was sort of going to be Stitch centric. Really, it was going to be mostly a Stitch book, and then there was a certain point when we got where we got the green light to really use Lilo in a big way. And it was huge, because then it's like, oh, okay, well, now we can do this and this and this, you know what I mean? So it was very exciting. But the initial idea was, I mean, with a lot of these characters, there are certain themes, right? And so you're trying to figure out what's the deal with the character? What's this character's struggle? What's the thing that's like with the Hulk? I mean, the Hulk is kind of easy in a way, because the Hulk is so clearly about anger. You know what I mean? It's like, and so there's a million different ways you can explore this theme of anger, find different stories to tell. And people have done all kinds of different stories with the Hulk, Vader is actually also about, I mean, anger is a big part of Vader's story too, right? And in a funny way, it's also kind of part of Stitch's story. I mean, I guess it's a little bit less specifically anger, but more about like as Dr. Jumbo says in the movie, he was built for destruction. You know what I mean? Like this is what was created to do, is just like tear things up. And so there is this kind of sense of somebody who has this, who has this sort of destructive impulse, but is kind of learning about life and about other people and about his responsibilities to other people and how to relate to other people. And Lilo's got a similar kind of struggle in the sense that she's spoiler alert, but she's lost her parents, so she's living with her older sister and they're a little family. But Lilo has all kinds of, I mean, she's got a lot of impulse control issues. I mean, when we first see her, like in the second scene she's in the movie, she ends up, like knocking a girl down and biting her and stuff. You know what I mean? Like like this isn't, they don't pull back at all about the fact that she's really got issues. I mean, she's adorable and she's amazing and we love her, but she's also got, she hasn't figured out how to relate to people and how to deal with her own emotions in life, So it's kind of funny coming off of working on the Hulk and Vader to working on this, because it's like this, it's a totally different tone, I mean, it's really, I mean, all of these are kind of kid stories, but this is really a kid story. And so the scale of it is not, no one's killing younglings in this, Vader style, you know what I mean? But those, but playing with those themes is, like figuring out what's a story I can do that doesn't just repeat what happens in the movie, that takes it to the next level, and also gives us fun things that we can do, with all these sci-fi elements and everything. So I mean, it seemed like having Stitch, like we didn't want to have Stitch just be sort of browbeating himself the way he kind of does, about like, oh, I'm out of control, I'm bad, like that's kind of done in the movie. And so the nuance is that he's realizing that because of where he's come from and what other people want to do, if he's around, there's a potential that Lilo will be put into danger because of these other aliens who want to collect his DNA, right? So that's our plot hook, that these mild-mannered but resentful robots who are part of the cluster sovereign want to learn how to be tough so they can fight back and take over the galactic the galactic government, and so they want to get Stitch's DNA in order to power their own destruct. They want to learn how to be destructive by using Stitch's DNA. And then that gives us a plot where Stitch is separated and ends up, like traveling around the world trying to go to the most remote place he can go so that he doesn't put anybody else in danger. And then, I mean, not to spoil things too much, but then that sets us up for a character then learning more about relationships and responsibility. You know what I mean? Because it's like his first impulse is just like, oh, people I care about are gonna be put in danger. I just got to run away. I gotta get away from everything, and it's all my fault. I just have to get away. And the reality is that we all, like, there are shades of gray to everything, and also that we can't do it all by ourselves, and that the people who love us are part of our world, and we've got responsibilities to them, and they feel responsibilities to us, and just running away is not necessarily gonna help them, even though you think it might. You know what I mean? So there's, I mean, it's about Ohana, but then as Moana can tell, we're introducing another another sort of, Hawaiian concept of kuleana, which is responsibility. That kids learn that they not only are part of a family, but then they have responsibilities within that family and that wider community, to the environment, everything else. So those are the big themes. This was a very long-winded answer to a very simple question, but that's the kind of stuff that goes on in your head. I mean, on the one hand, sometimes you're just like, well, what would be a fun thing to fight? It's a kid's book. I don't want to have him fighting, like he does big, huge things. And so if he's fighting monsters, somebody might actually get hurt. What if he's fighting robots? You can sort of smash up robots and nobody really gets hurt. So, there's some of that element. But then deep down, you just got to figure out what the themes are and how those emotional stories will work.
Awesome. And no, we need to know all that context. That's what we're here for. We want all the tea. We want all the tea. I want to back us up real quick because I did want to dive right into that because I was so excited, to know this project was happening. I wanted to get some immediate feedback. But I do want to dig into your Pico. Greg, can you share a bit about your how your first writing journey got going, what you were inspired by, that made you want to pursue this writing career?
Right. Well, when I was a kid, I kind of wanted to be a writer from the time I was really, really young. Like in fact, I was home a while back and I found some old, like the first comic book I ever did, which was when I was like 5 or something. It was like about a dragon who became electric. That was the whole story, a dragon who became electric. But it actually is kind of funny because it also deals with monsters. You know what I mean? Like somebody will sort of losing control, which is again, something I'm writing about to this day. But so for years, I was a kid who drew because my mom was the kind of mom who bought us. She hated coloring books. She'd buy us art supplies and crayons and markers and paper, and but not coloring books because she wanted us to be making stuff up, which was amazing, real blessing. So, I grew up drawing and writing stories, and I did that, throughout grade school and high school and all that kind of stuff. I worked on the school paper. I did photography. I was a drama kid, and I wrote stories and all this kind of stuff. When I went to college, I kept doing this stuff. I was a member of an improv comedy group. I was writing for different literary magazines. I was drawing cartoons, but I was also studying political science. And at some point along the way, I kind of thought of myself, like, for whatever reason, I didn't think about becoming a writer professionally at that point. I was going to go into politics, and I actually went back home to Texas where I grew up, and I worked for Ann Richards when she was running for governor back in 1990. And I worked in her office after she got elected. And that was great. It was really fighting the good fight, and it meant a lot to me. It was really important. She was amazing. But I also kind of had this feeling of like, this is all good work, but a lot of people could be doing what I'm doing here. You know what I mean? Like this specific kind of work I'm doing. And there was part of me that always wanted to be doing more creative work, and so I ended up getting a scholarship to go to Oxford to study history. But while I was there, I got involved with a filmmaking group for the first time, which is something I'd always been really interested in, never had a chance to do. And I ended up going to NYU grad film from there. I did all these sideways things. So I went to NYU grad film. I made a ton of short films. I made a documentary about my Korean grandparents. And then I eventually made a feature film called Robot Stories. And then when that was getting out to festivals and all that, my agent got me a meeting with folks at Marvel because they saw the movie and they liked it. And I ended up moving sideways into comics. And almost 20 years. Yeah, it is going to be 20 years. My God, it's going to be 20 years this year. It's 2000. My God, I didn't even realize that. Yeah. 2004. In fact, right around this time was when I was starting to talk to Marvel, I think, back in the day. My God, 20 years ago. Anyway, so 20 years later, I've been writing comics. I've probably written almost 600 individual comic books during that time. And I've continued to do film stuff, but comics is what I do. I'm spending 90 to 95% of my time on comics. Still eventually you're going to see more. You're going to see another feature film from me, but I don't talk about it because they say comics will break your heart film industry doesn't even know you have a heart. So I don't talk about anything there until it's actually done. But yeah, so it's been pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that you have that experience in film too. And I think something that some maybe fans may not know is that you also have a passion for photography. How did that get started too?
Yeah, photography was a big deal for me growing up. My mom was a photographer. She not a professional photographer, but she was amazing. I realized that her aesthetic really is influenced. Because I grew up seeing her black and white photographs. She took literally thousands of 35 millimeter black and white photos of us when I was growing up. In fact, oh my God, yeah, I have it right here. This is the camera she bought me when I was in high school, and still have it. Got it fixed up recently. She taught me how to shoot and develop black and white film, and there's a lot of kind of things from my mom's. There are things that I learned from her that not only affected me as a photographer, but everything else. Sort of like she did like verite photography. She didn't like posing people. She liked just kind of like taking pictures of the moment as they were happening. And she loved photographing her children and kids, and she would like get down on their level. You know what I mean? Like literally get down on our level to take our picture. You know what I mean? So we'd be like looking at bugs or whatever. She'd be right down there next to us. In fact, so I did a book recently called I Belong to You, Motherland. This was after my mom died, and I made this book about growing up in Texas and sort of feeling connected to this world, and particularly the environment, like the natural environment, but also feeling sort of, as an Asian American kid, not quite feeling totally like I belonged, but also not feeling like I belonged, and also about my mom and what she taught me and the death of my mom. Anyway, but this is one of her photos, which is on the cover of the book. That's me as a little kid looking at bugs, but she just took these, incredibly beautiful little photos, which captured little moments, and I think I've always been obsessed with that whole thing, like just the little moments, the little details, those little ways people express themselves, how just a little gesture, or just the smallest natural unconscious movement tells you a story. So those are some of the things I learned from my mom. In the last, after she died, actually, I got back into 35 millimeter photography because my sisters and I just started looking at all of her old photos. I looked at all my old photos, and now I'm like surrounded by it's ridiculous. I'm surrounded by cameras. I've gotten completely obsessed, and I'm shooting all the time. And there's something about analog photography and that film grain look it's just organic, and it feels real, and it looks like memory to me. It's so weird, but it really gets me. It's just on that emotional human level. I think some of that is just nostalgia. That's just the way I grew up. So my actual memories are tied up with that. But I think there's also just something about stuff being actually real. You know what I mean? Like film comes from, film is it's a chemical process, and there's literally this little physical negative, and light goes through the negative, and it shines, and that's what you're seeing. You're seeing these tiny little kernels of silver that have been preserved on the film. You know what I mean? It's this. There's something very tactile about it, and I think on an almost subliminal level that we respond to that. So yeah, it's funny because I think that's also one of the reasons I respond to Lilo and Stitch so much. You know what I mean? Like all those. It's pre-digital revolution, right? And they or it was concurrent with digital revolution stuff happening, but it was one of the last 2D animation movies, and like I said, those backgrounds have this incredible organic handmade watercolor feel, and it just feels so real to me. You know what I mean? Like that whole look and feel, it just really appeals to me, both in film and art.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. And I love to hear about the connection with your mom. Like both Dana and we have our own, well, Dana does it professionally. She's a photographer, and I I kind of like, I dabble. I'm good enough to be good enough, but not professional. But I do love, there is something about the black and white, like the documentary feel, just like capturing the life moments. Just something really special about that. It's one of the things that I think I enjoyed as I was, learning more about you after being brought into the project. And I was like, oh, this is some really cool stuff. So thanks for sharing that with us.
Oh no, thanks for asking. Appreciate it.
So this is one of my favorite things to talk about. I've gotten to experience some of this with working with Moana on some projects and working at behind the scenes and creating new storylines, the creative process of creating characters and things like that. Moana is so good at capturing an idea and expanding on it and adding weight and credibility to it. It's one of my favorite things of working with her on. Can you give us some insight in your creative process? How do you approach developing a new character, or how do you decide where you're going to take these characters to?
That's those are great questions. Yeah, it is funny because things have different sort of origins, right? Like sometimes you want to do something just because you have this image in your head. You know what I mean? Like for years, my film dream project is Western with a Chinese gunslinger. I've got this script called Rio Chino that I've been trying to get made for over 20 years, and it's going to happen. It will happen. But that started with just me as a kid growing up in Texas, and I grew up in the 70s and 80s in Texas. I had, I loved cowboy stuff and Star Wars stuff and Dungeons and Dragons, all this outdoor adventure stuff. You know what I mean? And then I found out about the actual history of Chinese people in the Old West, and it was like, wow, this whole. So I just had this image of a Chinese gunslinger in my head for years, and so trying to like figure out what the story was. Then for that one, it's like it starts with this image, and then you kind of try to figure out what is this image all about? Why am I obsessed with this? And who is this character? And what kind of story am I trying to tell around it? Sometimes it comes together that way. Other times, stories come together from purely an emotional, like having this, like knowing what the emotional story is from the beginning. Like I've got one of the short films I made when I was in film school is called Mouse, and it was about a guy chasing a mouse around his apartment while he's trying to escape a conversation about a possible pregnancy with his girlfriend, like a coward. You know what I mean? And then the mouse becomes this whole, double sort of meaning where he's, like conflating this mouse with this hypothetical, pregnancy and everything. But that was, it was, from the beginning, it was like, I did have mice in my apartment at some point, you know what I mean? So I thought, a story where somebody's chasing a mouse would be very cinematic and visual, but then it was like, okay, but then it's got to have a real story. What's the real story, and the real story, it was just like, I was interested in doing a story with a really kind of unlikable main character, you know what I mean? Who was like, like a coward in a way, like somebody who's trying to escape something, because that's people sort of behaving badly, or that's an interesting thing to watch. It's entertaining often. And thematically that just kind of all just fell together. So, but I guess I've just described two things where it's like, I kind of had this initial sort of like genre related thing, person chasing a mouse or Chinese gunslinger, Western. And then I'm trying to find the emotional story behind it. Right. So that's, I guess the Planet Hulk came together in a similar way. You know what I mean? Because like when I was first talking to the Planet Hulk, to the editors at Marvel about it, they had this initial idea of like, we want to send Hulk to an alien planet and he becomes a gladiator. And that was about it. You know what I mean? I was like, okay, cool. That's awesome. Let's do it. But then, they let me just run wild, create the whole world and figure out what it was. But it was like, so I know it's a gladiator story, but what is this really about? And the more I worked on it, eventually I made myself a little card that I put on, like above my desk, and it said, monster to hero. It was about somebody who's treated like a monster. He's sent away from Earth because everybody thinks he's a monster, and he ends up in a place where the things that everybody hated him for on Earth are things that are actually virtues there. And during the course of it, he also learns, he ends up, like having to fight alongside other people who he needs help from and who need his help. And he eventually forms this kind of family, these warbound like here we go. We go with Ohana again. You know, monsters and Ohana. It's like this thing. It's funny. But that's so that. But yeah, starting with this genre thing and then finding out what the emotional story is. I guess that's often the way I'm doing things. Yeah, but that emotional story is so critical because we've all seen movies that have incredible action and they're gorgeous and they're so, like it's mind blowing, but they're really kind of boring because the characters just don't matter. You know what I mean? And then you can see a movie that's, that has nothing in terms of effects or whatever, and you're absolutely compelled because it's so real. When I was going to a lot of film festivals, when I was on the film festival circuit with my films, I would always really make an effort to watch the independent documentaries more than anything else because there was always going to be something compelling. You know what I mean? There was always going to be something real there. So that's what you gotta find with these things.
I'm so happy to hear you say that. That lets me know just a little bit that I feel like I'm on the right path because that's what we attacked in our current story in Hot Shot is the emotion.
Yeah.
We know where we want him to be, but what's that emotional story that gets him there? And yes, so I just feel like I got the Greg stamp of approval right there.
Oh, that's awesome. It's funny. Like I had a funny experience kind of related to this with this book I did called Duo for DC, which was about a couple who are basically they're both trapped in one mind. So the basic premise is like, how would you, if the person you love the most was literally in your mind and could see and hear and feel everything that you thought, what would that do to your relationship? You know what I mean? Like it's like if they and of course it would be incredibly stressful. It would be like it would be a real test. But that book got put on hold, and then the pandemic happened, and it just took a long time for that book to actually get finished. And so by the time we actually were getting it out of the world, like we'd done the first issue like 2 or 3 years before, and I was rereading it. And I was like, oh, you know what? For this really to work, can I get 2 extra pages for the first issue just to start with, where I can just have these characters kind of together in just a little quiet moment? You know what I mean? Because we needed that emotional connection from the very beginning, because the way it started otherwise with them kind of, going out and immediately sort of getting into plot stuff. And it's like, this is a love story, essentially. I got to start with that emotion, And yeah, it's working. You can work on this stuff for decades, and then you're still relearning the stuff that you already thought you knew. You know what I mean? It's like, let's start with that. Let's get on the basic stuff here. So, but yeah, it's always like, why do I care? What's the heart? What's the heart of this thing?
Incredible. So don't mind me, I'm hopping around just a little bit here. But with diversity and representation in storytelling being very important, especially now. And in your work, how do you approach incorporating perspectives and characters into those narratives?
Yeah, well, that's always been hugely important. It's kind of funny, like during the whole origin story thing, one thing I didn't mention is that, I was really interested in politics because I grew up, I don't know. I mean, as a non-white kid, like I'm half white, I'm half white and half Asian, but definitely when I was growing up, I mean, you saw that, you saw the picture. Like I looked, particularly when I was a kid, I looked pretty much full-blood Asian, and I knew I was different. Other people told me I was different, in not so nice ways sometimes. But I definitely grew up with this feeling of like, oh, I need to be able to, I don't know, that this somehow finding a way to tell your story, to communicate with other people, to explain, yourself, to connect with people, like that was vital for survival, and also just that was just, I don't know, that somehow that was my work, right? That was one of the things that drove me to politics. You know what I mean? Like this notion, and Ann Richards was kind of all about that. She talked about the new Texas and about like having a government that looked like the population of Texas. Texas is an incredibly diverse state. I think I saw a stat recently, which I think that I could be wrong about this, but I think there are more Black people living in Texas than there are in New York. You know what I mean? Like in New York State, like Texas is incredibly diverse. With people of all different backgrounds, and even when I was a kid, I mean, I was one of the only Asian kids in my schools growing up. It's definitely, the Asian population has definitely increased since then. Anyway, but this notion of like, I don't know, can't we all just get along? You know what I mean? Like trying to find a way to connect with people. Like that was a thing that drove me into politics. It's also a thing that has driven me as a writer. You know, I thought about this when I was working in politics, and it was this notion that like people don't change because of arguments, debate, you know, reason. Like people don't change their feelings because you've argued them into it. You know, and you know, this was just my experience, right? But then there's, you know, scientific research on this. You know what I mean? That oftentimes that when faced with like rational explanations, people just become more locked into whatever they came into the room believing from the beginning. You know what I mean? I think my experience is people change because of emotional experience. You know what I mean? Like, and not everybody is going to change, right? But people who, you know, like, this is such a stereotypical example, but like, you know, like a homophobic dad has a better chance of changing because he finds out that his kid is gay than if somebody argues with him about, you know, that you need to treat all people decently. You know what I mean? Like having that direct experience with somebody that you care about and relate to on a human level, like that's anyway. But in this kind of funny way, I mean, and so in the like stories, movies, comics, books, poetry, all of this stuff creates emotional experiences. I mean, there's definitely rational stuff going on in this work as well, but it's really an emotional experience. You go to the movies, you see this giant face on screen. Maxine Hong Kingston wrote about this. You see a giant face on screen, and if the movie tells you to fall in love with that face, you're going to fall in love with that face. Doesn't matter who it is. Doesn't matter what they look like. You're going to relate to that person. You know what I mean? And that's just incredibly powerful. So those are, you know, those are some of the things that drove me to come back to storytelling, you know, and become a writer and a filmmaker and now a comics person and all of that. And so over the years, I've you know, had a special interest in working on books that had people of all different backgrounds, and I've been really fortunate, you know. Like I mean, I think I'm probably best known, you know, and I'm best known for Planet Hulk, really. But even a Planet Hulk, I mean, Planet Hulk is like, you know, like the big emotional core of that is his bonding with all of these different aliens, you know, and they're all like rejects within this world. They're all outsiders, right? You know what I mean? So it is this kind of like, I mean, it's a pan-species thing, but it is about that effort to understand the other. You know what I mean? Outsiders, you know, underdogs. But yeah, and then I guess I'm pretty infamous for writing tons of Asian and Asian American characters. I co-created Amadeus Cho back in the day with Takeshi Miyazawa at Marvel. Co-created Wave a few years back, Filipina superhero for Marvel with Lineal Yu, amazing artist, and I've just done a ton of other. I mean, just about every company I've worked with, I've done some Asian or Asian American character. The duo characters were Asian. I did this City Boy character for DC recently, who's a Korean character. But then I've also, like, I wrote Magneto Testament, which was about a Jew. Basically, it's historical fiction where we really made an effort to get the history as right as we could, which was about a Jewish German kid trying to keep his family alive during the Holocaust. And it's Magneto's origin story. And worked with Warren Simons, who was the editor on that. We got historical consultants from a historical consultant from the Simon Wiesenthal Center to help keep us on track there. But I worked on the Storm book. I did War Machine run. So I've had a, you know, it's important. And then even in just any other books that I'm working on, I'm always trying to diversify the cast in some way, you know. So those are, there's a thing that Gina Davis worked on. I mean, Gina Davis is, it's Gina Davis, right? That's what I'm thinking of. Yeah, she's, one of her things has been, for years, has been talking about improving roles for women in movies, you know. And one of the things she said is like, you know, if you're you're writing a script as a writer, you may just instinctively write, some doctor or some whatever, some secondary or tertiary character. And if you don't specify the gender of that character or the race for that matter, the people who make that are probably just going to cast a white guy. You know what I mean? Because that's the sort of cultural, people have been culturally programmed to think of that as the default. So she's like, why don't you just like describe the, like make that character a woman, just literally just define that character as a woman, and like that's one of those things that's stuck in my head a lot. You know what I mean? Like, let's just do that. Let's mix it up. I did a Firefly book, and we introduced, based on the Firefly TV show, the sci-fi show, and made a point, like we introduced a number of Asian characters and a Native American character, because I hadn't seen other Native American characters in that show, and thought, like we should do that. So that kind of stuff. I mean, you don't want to, but you also don't want to do that in kind of like a tokeny way or whatever. But one of the things Marvel talks about is like Marvel, it's the world outside your window. You know what I mean? And I think that's a good, that's kind of good, right? You know what I mean? It's like you walk around in New York City. New York City's got everybody, and so you should try to. I mean, that's one of the things I say all the time. I'm just trying to reflect the world I live in. But it takes work. I mean, case in point, we should turn this over to Moana, because with Lilo and Stitch, it was like, I'm Asian American. I'm not Native Hawaiian. I got some pretty. I feel like I got a good grounding, but I don't understand these I don't understand all the nuances. I'm not going to bring everything to the table that this deserves and that should be there. And also, with a thing like this, I want to get like a Native Hawaiian person should be getting some money out of this too. I mean, not to be gross, but you know what I'm saying? That's not even gross. That's like real though, right? You know what I mean? Like these stories, you want to share that if you can, right? But anyway, so working on these stories, it's also important to bring in folks who are going to help make it real.
And that brings me to a question that I want to ask both of you, and Moana can answer first. I just recently got through watching, I can't pronounce the name of it, but it's on Netflix. It's a monster K-drama. Just came out, 10 episodes. It's incredible. And I was speaking, and me and my boss at work, coincidentally, both realized we were watching this. And we were talking about, and it takes place during the Japanese and Chinese, when they were all heated and things just were not good with them. They were under the rule of China and whatnot. And there's this perspective of how they view torture. And they were talking about it. And they were talking about how are you still happy that these two people, they betrayed you? They ruined you. They told on you. They told all your business. Da 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 da. And this one was really trying to destroy these people who we considered family. And you were like, oh my God, as a viewer, like, no, he's going to hate them now because they gave him up. And what I wasn't expecting was, he said, of course they did, because you tortured them, because you had them for weeks, because you put water and black pepper in their nose, because you pulled their nails, because you destroyed them. So of course they gave me up, and I still love them. And I was like, all these dots just connected in my head, and I was like, wait a minute, that makes sense. And like, I had this idea from Western culture that in our films that you don't snitch, you go through all the torture, you don't give that person up. That's the heroic thing to do. But when he said this, it makes sense. Of course, I don't want anyone in my family to suffer for me. And speaking with my boss, who was Chinese, and he was like, yeah, that is a big cultural difference. I did not expect that perspective. And we were going back and forth about that. So that all to say is, have you, either one of you, and Moana can answer first, noticed anything culturally different in your writing or when you're trying to write something, and how it's viewed here in the West?
So yes, the answer is yes. I mean, and I now that I'm working on some, more broader, like not my own independent series, The Adventures of Nakoa Nohea, I'm working on other people's IP, right? and I wish I could say more about it, but it's IP that like I have expertise about, and I'm trying to bring like the cultural nuances to it. But when you're working with an editor who is not doesn't also share that, they essentially end up editing out everything that makes it like so important. They're like the pieces that they end up taking out or wanting to take out. I'm like, no, please don't touch that. Like I know for you because it's not a mainstream view, but this is how we would view things, and that needs to stay authentic. So um, I don't know. Maybe Greg can offer some tips on how to deal with that in a way that doesn't put the gatekeepers off in a way, because it really is important. And you know for me it goes to like these perceptions or these I just feel like they're misperceptions, quite frankly, that certain cultural stories will not sell to the masses or to the mainstream. And I'm just like, number one, that's crap. Any good story is going to sell. And if you write stories that smaller, more narrow populations can authentically relate to, you're bringing them into a bigger genre. Like you need to include them as part of this of the story, as part of the perspective, because as Greg said, like our world is very diverse and we need to bring everyone into it, not in a checkbox kind of way, which is why I love Greg. Like he brings the diversity in there, but not in just like I'm just gonna put this person that looks different in front of you. He puts a story behind them too, and it makes these people feel real to you, and that's like what draws you into a good story. Like I can relate to something that's happening, like, oh my god, what's gonna happen next? Like, are you serious? Is that really gonna happen right now? And like you're trying to anticipate all of these things that they're gonna go through. So yes, 100%. And I feel like, well, I'm just being blatantly honest, I get really frustrated when people who don't come out of my culture try to teach me about my culture. And I'm just like, look, like they try to overspeak to you. Like I get it all the time, like, oh, you're from Hawaii? I'm like, yes. And then they go off on like, oh, I was there and da 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 da. They go off on their story and they start talking about stuff, and I'm like, yeah, but that part's not really true though. Like this is what really happened, and maybe you should like think about this. And they just a small amount of people will take what you're saying, but a lot of people just kind of go off and just do their own thing, and they're all of a sudden the expert on Hawaiian culture, which to me is problematic in so many different ways. And so that's just yet another reason why I appreciate Greg and Nate for bringing me onto this project, so that we can represent, Hawaiian culture in a more informative way, and not just like the typical commercial aspect that you see. They're trying to sell you a location so you'll come and spend your money, but digging into the people who actually live here, part of the culture, the way we view our land, our ohana. In the first issue we talk about, as Greg mentioned, kuleana, but that is it. So much of Hawaiian words, these are like very layered words. There are multiple meanings depending on the concept of like the context of where you're using it. In this particular book, we're kind of using it as responsibility, but it's also a birthright, a duty, a privilege, like so many things that if you expand the context of what you're talking about, like kuleana to your community, I mean, that's the core of like why I do everything that I do right now. Like I made this podcast because I was looking for media platforms to help promote Pacific Islander stories in, children's literature, and they're not out there. So I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm gonna take action and solve a problem, because I'm not one. I'll get frustrated and I'll need to vent, but I'm not one who's gonna stay there in like a whining capacity. Like I'm a problem solver. Like what can I do to move the needle forward, to inspire some people to get excited, so that like there will be another kid who's watching what I'm doing and be like, oh my God, I can do that. She came from my island and she's working on Lilo and Stitch. Are you serious right now? And it takes place on Kauai. Like I get to write about my home. That's awesome. You know what I mean? So for me, it's hard though, because you're surrounded by people who don't share the same worldview as you do. And so it really is a consistent battle that you're really trying to do your best as a writer in this context, but also elevate your community as a whole, and trying to seek out wider platforms where people can hear our perspectives.
Yeah, it is a challenge. It's a challenge. I think a lot about. I mean, I've been very lucky in that I've worked with a lot of great editors who got it. You know what I mean? Like they might not know they might not have the depth of knowledge, but they're totally open to, okay, let's do this thing. Like when I was introducing Amadeus Cho into comics back in the day, I was like, okay, yeah, so he's this Korean American kid, et cetera, et cetera. And they were like, cool, let's do it. You know what I mean? There was none of that, like, because I came out of the film industry where I was trying to get my Chinese gunslinger movie made, and like people would say, does it, like people would just kind of, they'd be like, okay, that's cool, but we can't do that. You know what I mean? Because they just couldn't wrap their heads around how to finance it. In comics, it was just like, sure, let's do it. You know what I mean? Like they don't have to like, I don't know. I had a really good experience introducing a bunch of different characters like that. But then there are also like, like there's like Moana says, there's times when you are like having to, just having to explain stuff is actually really, it's stressful and tiring. You know what I mean? Like even if everybody's really supportive and helpful, it's a lot of pressure, particularly if you're the only one. You know what I mean? Because then you're like responsible for, oh, I got to catch everything. You know what I mean? Like, and if this doesn't work, it's all, like I'm the face. You know what I mean? Like this is not gonna be fun. And I don't know. I did back when the movie, not the movie, the TV show Fresh Off the Boat was coming out. You remember that show? About the Taiwanese American family, Chinese American family, and with the restaurant and all of that. But I think it was Jenny Yang who I was at an event, and she was also talking about this online. She's a comedian and actress, and she was saying that when stuff like this comes out, she gets what she called the rep sweats, the representation sweats. So like, because if you work in the media and you're a member of a group that doesn't get a lot of attention, when something comes out that sort of, represents your community, you're like, oh, please let it be good. You know what I mean? Like, please let it not be bad. Let it not like, so that everybody judges it and then never greenlights another thing. You know what I mean? And then as a creator, I get the rep sweats of like, oh my God, I worked on this. I hope it does, I hope I didn't screw it up. You know what I mean? And that's real, so there's that whole thing about sort of being, feeling all that pressure. But then it's also like, yeah, I mean, and then being the person who has to kind of keep track of stuff, who understands sort of a lot of the pitfalls more than other folks necessarily do, but then you have to explain all of that, and then you have to kind of go through. I mean, I remember reading this was on Twitter years ago. There was a gay game designer who was writing about working in games, and they were saying that that one of the frustrating things was that as a gay game designer, they had to spend huge amount of time just making sure, feeling like they had to just kind of keep an eye on things to make sure things didn't get screwed up, like that bad stuff didn't get through. You know what I mean? And to make sure that whatever the representation part of it was good, and that people who didn't care about that, or all they had to worry about was like, it felt like all they had to worry about was like making their game good or doing their one little thing. If you care about this stuff, you have a whole nother job that you're doing. You know what I mean? That takes up as much energy and time and everything. I mean, to me, those things are connected, because you got it for like the story itself, even if it's not specifically about being Native Hawaiian or being Asian or being whatever, even if that's not the direct content of the story, if that's part of the background of these characters, getting those details right make the story better. Like the story actually needs that in order to really become everything it can become. And so working on those, getting the representation stuff right is part of getting the whole story right. You know what I mean? Like those things are tied together. But oh yeah, it can be tiring. I mean, well, you said like if I have any advice, I don't know. I mean, it's hard, right? But one thing I do remember, and this isn't directly related to representation, but this is just working on big work for hire things, is that there's stuff that I sometimes really want to do and I can't do. And in the end, it doesn't really matter. Like it would be cool, and I might have had my heart set on it. It may have even been something that from the very beginning I was like, this is going to be awesome. but sometimes it's like that's not the essential part of the story. Like in my original pitch for World War Hulk, he was gonna, like, the big climactic thing was gonna be between the Hulk and Thor, because those are the classic characters. And Thor, as it turns out, because we're working in a shared universe with a bunch of other writers and a bunch of other stories, Thor was not available for the story. And so we ended up using the Sentry instead. And so that was kind of like, oh. But then, I did the work, and Sentry actually has a backstory with the Hulk, and there was a whole thing we could do there. So it worked out, you know what I mean? And that wasn't and there's like a million different like little plot points and things that had to be sort of negotiated through. And one thing that I realized is, like, all of that is fine. That's negotiable. But what I really had to protect was the core emotional story. You know what I mean? Like, of what the Hulk was going through. And as long as I could do that core emotional story, so a lot of those details, it's fine to let those things, go. So but then, in the heat of the moment, you don't always know what is, that's work, right? To figure out what is the core thing, what am I, and sometimes you can give up things that maybe don't seem so core. And then you realize, oh, actually that was part of setting up all of this. And now it has less emotional resonance, and, but you got to just do your best. But yeah. And then, I definitely, I haven't necessarily been in that position yet where I had to, like, I've definitely said no to projects where I just had a feeling like this was going to be too big a lift, sometimes there are like characters that just are really kind of problematic to begin with. And they're sort of like a reclamation job, right? To kind of do something to make this, this legacy character non-offensive, right? And sometimes those are awesome. You know what I mean? Like, I got to do a really cool thing with Oddjob in the James Bond books. We made him a sexy, rival, and eventual, he had this kind of, love-hate relationship with Bond. It was amazing. And so sometimes those can be great, but then sometimes it's like, I don't know if this is really going to go. And I've said no to jobs like that. I haven't walked from a job because I felt like it wasn't going to work in that regard. But sometimes people do, and that's good. You know what I mean? Like, it's also scary as a freelancer. You know what I mean? Saying no to anything is scary. But at the same time, like, if you're able to do the kind of good work you want to do, you do that. If you're lucky to be able to do that a few times, people will start to say, oh, this is the person who can do that kind of thing. And then people will come to you because of that. And then hopefully, you can get the kind of opportunities that you want, where you maybe have to fight a little less, and also develop relationships with people who kind of get it from the beginning. And then, but then every new project, like, this is life, right? And it's all there's always new stuff you got to learn, and, new folks you got to, learn about it. If you're a writer, you're going to be working on, unless I'm only writing half Asian kids who grew up in Texas, like, I got to learn about other folks and other parts of, other experiences and all of that. And that's, and that's all good. Right. But kind of building that team, and also building the comfort with your team of being able to reach out to folks who know what's what, and get that kind of support. But yeah, it's a whole nother thing. You know what I mean? That because we care, it becomes part of our job. You can definitely lose sleep over it, but it's a good thing to be doing, I think, right? And also, everybody screws up. We're all gonna screw it up at some point, but we just got to do our best. You know what I mean? Like, I'm always, I'm really, really trying hard. I sweat this a lot, but yeah, I don't know if that's advice, but it's just like, I guess it's more like comradeship, right? We're all going through this.
Well, like you both said, it's a heavy job, and when they ask for you to carry it, you want to make sure that you do it right. You want to make sure you cover as many bases as you possibly can, and like both of you said, sometimes you're the only person in that position to cover it, so it is a heavy load.
It is. One thing I will say, and this, I guess, because if you're talking about advice, speaking of being the one person, is bring in more people if you can. Like, when I was working I did these Agents of Atlas books at Marvel, and they were great. And they let me do this amazing stuff, doing like these big Asian and team up books, which had never been done before on that kind of scale. But at a certain point, like with the Wave character, it was like, I co-created this with a Filipino artist. It's been amazing. But when we eventually were doing these stories, these backup stories that focused on Wave and a Chinese character. And it was like, I want to get a Filipino co-writer to work on this. And we pulled in Alyssa Wong, and who's amazing. And Alyssa's gone on to, like they're writing Dr. Aphra and a bunch of other stuff at Marvel now. And they're fantastic. But that's another person who kind of gets it, right? You know what I mean? Like this is a person who has experiences that I don't have, and it's really specific for this project, but just long term, that's another colleague, you know what I mean? And I guess so and I don't know, there's a lot of other folks who've helped me, and I've tried to help, and of all different backgrounds, because like developing those kinds of relationships is absolutely key to keeping going.
We have a couple questions from Instagram, Dream Fury Comics. What's up? People enjoy writing bad guys. Greg, when you were writing Darth Vader, did you enjoy writing such a dark character?
Oh yeah. I mean, it is kind of funny because it's a little weird. Like, you don't want to glorify, right? But and I struggled that the most when I was writing a book about. It was a companion book to Magneto Testament. It was called Red Skull Incarnate, and it was basically the origin of the Red Skull. And we treated it like Magneto Testament, where it was historical fiction and there's no superhero stuff in it at all. It's about this kid. It was basically about an orphan growing up during the Weimar Republic and falling in with the Nazis. So this was our main character, but he's a horrible, sociopathic Nazi, like the worst of the worst. And so I wanted to make a story that was understandable, but not make a story that was gonna glorify this character or make this character feel like a hero. You know what I mean? Like, so there is that kind of a thing. And that's harder when you're doing something that's closer to reality like that, right? So that's something to be aware of, I think, or that's something I had to be aware of. Vader's a little different in that, it's a very clearly a fantasy story, right? But all those, emotions are real. The interesting thing about Vader is that, he's really the main character of the first 6 movies. You know what I mean? Like, Lucas has described it. It's like, it's the big overarching storyline is the tragedy of Darth Vader. And it starts with him as a kid in Phantom Menace, like this kind of, literally an innocent kid, this plucky, mischievous kid, and who becomes a monster. He's manipulated in a lot of ways into becoming a monster, embraces that, and then ultimately, a spoiler alert, ultimately is redeemed by his son, right? At the end of the whole thing. But so that big emotional story gives Vader, a massive amount of emotional heft. And so it makes him not just another Bond villain, you know what I'm saying? Like, not just strictly evil guy, you know what I mean? Even though he is absolutely a villain. At the same time, a big part of the pleasure of Vader is seeing him just be a badass, you know what I mean? So I don't know, but it is a ton of fun writing Vader. But it is also that kind of a thing where I'm not trying to glorify him. Like, I'm always trying to show that, that he's making bad decisions. How's that? But yeah, I don't know. We talked about this before with Lilo and Stitch and just with characters in general. There's a lot of fun watching people do bad things. You know what I mean? Like, there's this kind of, the original Hulk, the Bill Bixby, Lou Ferrigno TV series was popular with everybody. And I think it's because the Hulk would just freaking cut loose. And that's very viscerally satisfying. Particularly in that, because he's usually, tearing up something or somebody that deserves it on some level. Right. You know what I mean? And we're always so aggravated by, just day-to-day life is so aggravating that it's nice to have this sort of fantasy place where you see somebody, really, deliver that payback. And then, in the Hulk story, he always pays for it. You know what I mean? Like that uncontrolled anger is always, there's always a price to be paid. So that's sort of where the, the emotional reality comes in. But yeah, it's that kind of combination of just sort of visceral fun and sort of I don't know, that kind of like bad wish fulfillment about like, wouldn't it be fun to kind of be bad for a little while? But then you got to pair that with the cost of all that and the real emotional story to make it real, I think. But yes, the short answer is, yeah, it's a blast writing villains. I think it's the same way it's a blast for actors to play villains. I think they freaking love it. So.
All right, and Dream Theory had one more question. Did you guys consider making Lilo and Stitch comic series a book adults could enjoy also? But did you guys decide to aim it at a certain age range?
Oh, it's definitely a book that adults can enjoy. I mean, absolutely. I mean, we talk about it as a kid's book because it really is. I mean, it is primarily a kid's book, the same way the shows are kids shows and the movie's a kid's movie. But you watch that Lilo and Stitch movie, it doesn't matter what age you are, you're going to freaking love it. You know what I mean? And I think we're aiming for that same vibe with the comics. Absolutely accessible to kids, even kids who can't read the words, like a parent could read it to them. And I think kids would enjoy it. But it's got, the themes are, like it doesn't have adult level violence or, there's there's no sex in it, you know what I mean? But and the sort of level, like the emotional story works as the kind of thing that the emotional story is relatable to a kid. You know what I mean? Like I can't control my own self completely. This world is confusing. I'm trying to make my way through a confusing world. Those are things that are totally relatable to a little kid. But honestly, they're totally relatable to adults too. You know what I mean? So it's a thing that the short answer is I think of these actually, I mean, I think of them as all ages books in the sense that like, people of all different ages can enjoy them. I think it is helpful for us to sometimes refer to them as kids books though, just so that like everyone, like I wrote these Stranger Things books, which are middle grade books, and there are also, for all ages, but like adults will read them and will enjoy them, but sometimes people are like, yeah, this kind of feels like it was written for younger kids, like they're expecting like adult levels of violence or whatever, and that's not what these books are doing. These books are made for like scholastic book fairs and for younger readers, which I realize is a bit of a weird thing because the show would be R-rated if it was in the movies, you know what I mean? And the books are more like PG, you know what I mean? Or these comics. I'm on a tangent here, but it's like the describing things, like for me to say it's a kid's book is a way to kind of also say, yeah, this isn't like the grim and gritty, like revisionist Lilo and Stitch, again, like Lilo and Stitch with guns. It's not that, you know what I mean? So we're just setting expectations. But no, if you like the movie, if you're an adult who liked the movie, the comic should feel totally comfortable, and you should get them for yourself too, not just for kids.
Excellent. Well, we are a little bit over on our time. I was going to say, is there anything in closing that either of you want to say to, I don't know, I'm already motivated. I'm going to get my and I think our audience is too, but is there anything else you might want to say in closing to motivate us all to run out on New Comic Book Day when we get this book, or anything else you all may be working on?
I want to give a shout out to the art team on this book. So Nate is the editor, and Nate's been great because he's just been so supportive and facilitating all of this stuff and doing a new thing with, having a cultural consultant and all of that kind of stuff. Like that's not necessarily standard for a lot of books, but it was essential for this. And I'm so, his support has been amazing. And, but huge shout out to Julia and Jeff, the artist and the letterer. Julia did both the line art and the coloring, And the book is just gorgeous. It's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Like I mean, the characters are spot on in terms of like, like if you know how they look from the movie, they look just like that, but they're not, and the tricky thing is sometimes when artists are like trying to stay on target, it can get stiff, right? Because you're trying so hard to make it look, but it's so fluid, and the emotional stuff is so good. It's beautiful. It's just really so get it for the story, get it for the art, get it for everything. And also I mean, I just want to also sing Moana's praises again. It's been amazing working with her, and I'm so happy she's on the book, and thrilled to have the chance to do this podcast. So thank you. Oh yeah, is there anything else to plug? You can find out what I'm doing at my website, gregpak.com, gregpak.com. I'm also on Mastodon, Instagram, Blue Sky, and what else? I'm on Threads. You can find links to all those things actually at gregpak.com. I still have a Twitter account, but I don't use it anymore. I don't like Twitter anymore. And then, the last thing I'll say is just because you were talking about, being inspired and all that, and I was thinking about like just being inspired to make stuff, is that if you're a storyteller, if you're a comics creator or whatever, I hope that this discussion we've been having makes you feel like your stories matter. You know what I mean? Like that's that people talk about what's the name? I'm losing words these days. People talk about imposter syndrome. You know what I mean? People feeling like, oh, who am I to be doing this? You know what? Flip that on its head. I think it's like there are lots of stories that we have to tell that literally only you could tell, only I could tell. You know what I mean? There's certain finding out what those stories are for you and telling them. That's what I still try to do that every day. You know what I mean? Like, what am I bringing to this story that only I could do? Like what's the true thing? And you know it when you feel it. You know what I mean? But like that's what I'm bringing to it. That's what I'm here to do. I just say go for it. Go for it. Try to find that.
Awesome. Moana?
Yeah, so I think what I will say is you need to get the comic because Greg tells awesome stories. As he mentioned, our artist is straight killing this comic. When I saw the pencils, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. It's like the movie on comic book pages, seriously. And then if we have there are great variant cover artists too, David Nakayama.
David Nakayama, who's from Hawaii.
Yes.
And Josh Middleton,
Yes.
Jennifer L. Meyer, and Craig Rousseau, I think, are the variant cover artists on the first issue. And they're all different, and they're all gorgeous. They all do a different kind of thing. So
yeah, you're gonna want every cover, and if you want to have it signed, you're in the New York, New Jersey kind of area, or you want to just jump on a train and come see us. I'm jumping on a train. Come jump on a train with me. We will be at Midtown Comics, the Grand Central location, on January 31st, which is the day of the release of the book. Greg and I will be there. Nate will be there. We'll sign some stuff. Nate will draw you cartoons, and it's gonna be fun. I'm really looking forward to it. It'll be at 5:00 at Midtown.
Come see.
And you're gonna sign my books.
Sorry, you broke up there, Mike. Could you repeat?
I said I'm picking up my books down here in Columbus, but when I see you in DC, you're gonna just sign my books.
Yes, I got you 100%. I got my table, so I will see you at AwesomeCon. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show and taking the time, Greg and Moana. Congratulations. I sing your praise all the time, and I'm so proud and excited that you got this opportunity, and you're doing amazing things. I just love to see it so much, and I think I'm very excited for your book when it comes out, and I'm gonna snatch it up. And all of you should go out here and get this. Look, I'm talking to you, watching this panel, watching this on a rerun. Go cop this. This is how we get more things like this. Good content, good storytelling, good art, and stories from different perspectives, different cultures. We need this, all right? Do not listen to that little sector over there yelling about woke and all that dumb stuff. Listen to us, because we need this, and I'm telling you, it's so very important that these stories are out here. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Please give this a share, a like, and a subscribe. And if I can just do one more time, we have the Hot Shot Kickstarter going on right now. Action figures are available on this Kickstarter, y'all. fskgo.com. It is over tomorrow at 9 p.m. And we just unlocked our second stretch goal. So magnets are going out to all the physical backers.
Congrats.
Thank you. Any support that you guys can give over there would be much appreciated. As always, thank you for allowing me on your platform and coming here and pitch it for a little bit. I always enjoy being a guest on this fantastic show. Hope everybody else have a good night, and we're off.
Thank you so much.
So many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can't keep history on the shelf. If we won't tell it, we will.
If this the land of the free, it was a freedom then. When they annexed Hawaii and called it Cedar Lands, without any type of payment and no signing off. Called themselves the Republic in 1894. 1.2 million acres overtaken from the Native Hawaiians. When they resisted, the West retaliated in violence and erasure. The Hawaiian language is banned as part of colonialism's plan to expand, yeah.
Stuck between a rock and a hard place. Multiple bombings of Kaho'olawe. As a part of their ongoing war with Asia, used it as a place for target practice. No consent or compensation. Colonizers call for annexation. No regard for all the locals. School will never let you know. So many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can't keep history on the shelf. If we won't tell it, we will. Too many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can't keep history on the shelf. If we won't tell it, we will. We will.
So if you put Hawaii into perspective, well, Black and Asian history is interconnected. Considering the fight with the Pacific, then of course, versus Asia, they was treated as a middleman for war, but didn't let the Western colorism run its course, cause dark skin was a sign of dignity to core. The land was taken in the name of capitalism, when prior to it was an actual kingdom. Clap back at the system.
Stuck between a rock and a hard place. Multiple bombings of Kaho'olawe. As a part of their ongoing war with Asia, used it as a place for target practice. No consent or compensation. Colonizers call for annexation. No regard for all the locals. School will never let you know. So many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can't keep history on the shelf. If we won't tell it, we will. Too many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can't keep history on the shelf. If we won't tell it, we will. So many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can't keep history on the shelf. If we won't tell it, we will. Too many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can't keep history on the shelf. If we won't tell it, we will. We will.